You're listening to the Karmic Mirror podcast, where we explore the wisdom tucked within the layers of the self-help world.
Together, we bridge the gap between esoteric teachings and practical tools for everyday life, with self-love and personal growth at the heart of each conversation.
Whether you're a seasoned seeker or just beginning your path, join us and uncover the magic within and around you.
Hello, Karmic Mirror community. In this episode, Michelle and I are going to talk about one of our sacred pillars. We are going to explore the many layers of self-care, not just necessarily in a to-do list type of manner, but in a way of really honoring your energy, your emotions, and your individual essence. We're going to unpack how self-care enters our lives, what it truly means to us now, while it continues to be ever evolving, and we navigate the realities of modern living. This conversation invites reflection, grace, and of course, always authenticity as we start to think about the wellness space and really what feels nourishing for Michelle and I when it comes to mind, body, and soul. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. I love talking about self-care and the evolution of what self-care looks like to me, but also just what I've seen over time coming from working in the beauty industry, which is very much the kind of surface level that we maybe are introduced to when we think of self-care. Of course, we talked about bubble baths and face masks and all the things, but it goes so much more deep than that. And it's almost like the evolution of self-care can go parallel to your evolution of inner work and healing, because as you go deeper into that realm, the self-care sort of expands, goes deeper than surface level as well.
Yeah, and self-care is one of our karmic mirror pillars. Something that when Michelle and I were birthing Karmic Mirror and really thinking about at the core. And what's interesting, Michelle, is I found myself the other day, I was listing out our values for someone because they were asking me about podcast metrics. And I just said, Michelle and I don't really go down that. We have our values, and that was really our focus of this podcast, which really felt in time for this conversation today. Because for us, self-care didn't feel like following metrics in podcast posting and getting into the nitty-gritty. But as you reflect back at that time, why did you feel it was so important to be part of really the roots of Karmic Mirror?
It just felt really organic. It kind of seemed like a no-brainer to include the conversation, the topic of self-care and wellness, but really like holistic self-care. So the kind of whole body approach to self-care, not just the external, but actually considering all areas that make up, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all of those layers that deserve tending also. So it made perfect sense. And I think the approach as a pillar, as a value for us, and I think we use pillar, but it's like oftentimes people confuse in today's day and age, like content pillars, and that's certainly it too. It sort of informs what we talk about, what we share, kind of what kind of guests we want to bring in and the topics we want to discuss, but also redefining self-care for that whole body, mind, body, soul approach. And, like I said already, I came from the beauty industry where I think it felt really backwards for many, many years. And so getting to talk about it and turn it inside out and approach it. I mean, I've wrote a few blogs on this. It's a topic I love to get into because so many people don't allow themselves, women especially that I've met or that I've coached, things like that. Mothers don't allow self-care feels really, really indulgent and it feels selfish.
I was gonna shout out the episode we did on holistic beauty also, and we'll tag that in the show notes. Was a really beautiful and eye-opening for me personally episode where we picked your brain a little bit on that. For you, when did self-care get on your radar? Because I'll be honest, self-care got on my radar when I became a bonus mom. That's when intellectually in my brain, when I think about how self-care really started to come to the forefront of the work I did. I mean, that's what within the last five-ish years. But what about for you?
Super early. My mom always is taking care of herself from a pampering standpoint. And so for me, I can trace back, and this is again going back to the beauty aspect of it, the outer layers, but I think that imprints on you from a young age. I didn't live with my mom full time. So when I was with her, she always took me to get my nails done, always was making, she was the one that organized my haircuts and the things, and I actually got to have a say in those experiences versus growing up with my dad. I didn't get to choose how much came off of my haircut. He made those decisions for me. You can only cut half an inch off of her hair, no nail polish, no nothing, no makeup, no shaving your legs. And my mom, it was more of an experience that we shared together. So I can always think back to being a little girl and going to the nail salon and joke around about how, one person would be doing my nails on one side and another on the other, and I'd be like a kid. And I was also really girly. I've always been super girly, super feminine. And so with my mom, I got to express that. And, even down to the way that I dressed and picked out clothes, not an option with my dad. He picked out my outfits to kind of match with what he wanted me to wear, which is a whole other
Goodness.
story.
Yeah, that's a whole
But with
other podcast episode.
but with my mom, I always was part of the experience, and it was like these memories that we shared, and it was moments where I got to be in that space that felt really, really natural. I mean, as we've said many times, I have a Taurus moon, so having that very Venus-driven tenderness and care, it's so innate and very important to me. And so I think that's really where I began to want to take care of myself, and like I said, it's the outer layers, and not to bash on my dad, but anymore, because he was someone who really did take care of himself physically. And so I learned that from an early age of just always feeling, and maybe at the time it was, wanting to be presentable. Those were the words, always presentable. You get dressed up to go here, and everything is, so I had really strict guidelines about what taking care of your outer self looked like. And I think that's the roots of my self-care. Naturally, I went into the world of beauty. It was so kind of drew me in.
I I just giggle a little bit. I mean, obviously you have been such an expander in this area for my life personally. And I just giggle when you're like, we used to go get our nails done. And I'm thinking about when did I first get my nails done? I mean, it's like hard for me to even remember. And I think what I just reflect on when we're young, this concept of self-care, I've referenced this quote a couple of times, but that sentiment of children will not treat themselves the way you tell them to treat themselves. They will
Mm,
treat themselves the way their parents treat themselves. And as I'm listening to you and reflecting, on the parallels of both of your parents, and I'm thinking about my parents, and I think just drastically different, right? And it's two different households, obviously. But I mean, I couldn't even tell you what my mom did to take care of herself when we were younger. Like when you were talking about your mom, I was having just a little bit of empathy thinking about my mom and just making me a little sad. So it's
mm,
also like no wonder as I got older, and I think especially when I became that bonus mom, it's like that sacrifice, 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 except I've been on a journey, right? Of being able to start to see the outcome of not taking care of myself, which is where
mhm,
self-care comes into. And I've been privileged and fortunate enough, and my life has led to such of which, I didn't have a home to take care of. I didn't have children to take care of. And so it is that space of I only had me to take care of. And when I started getting into to full circle back to what you were talking about with that self-care, actually comes down to that inner work and that inner love and
mhm.
being our best selves. And then all the cliches make sense, right? The can't fill other people's cups if your cups aren't
Yeah, you can't
filled.
pour from an empty cup, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was never really modeled for me. I never really observed it from that standpoint. And I think, yeah, I've seen how that has impacted me.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know that the understanding of the deeper layers came until much later, anyways. Like I said, being in a world where you're selling beauty and you're selling skincare, it's a lot of sound bites and it's a lot of speaking to insecurities to sell the cream that will give you the perfect night's sleep when really the self-care is getting the freaking sleep, not buying the $300 cream to make you look like it. That's again just kind of
Yeah.
perpetuating, filling this void with more product, more things, putting more money and more energy into outside sources. And it all comes back, right? When I think about the parallel between self-care and inner work, it's so real because the more you realize that you're valuable and you're worthy of tending to your mind, to your body, your emotions, your spiritual energy, the more it expands your sense of self-worth and you realize that you are allowed the time. And we start to, I think, simultaneously deconstruct what that looks like. It feels overwhelming. I can think of numerous people who I've met or spoken with or coach who feel overwhelmed that they have to put a lot of time and energy into just taking care of themselves. But the truth is, like we said so many times, even recorded a very early episode about like these small steps that really compound. And I love using the term holistic self-care, even though it can feel really buzzwordy right now. And it has, but I've stayed true to this concept because it really is about nurturing. It's about having compassion. It's about self-awareness. And everything is this feedback loop. If I don't believe that I'm worthy of caring about myself and taking care of my body, meaning eating well, getting sleep, these are all self-care. Moving my body, trusting my intuition, all of those things that feed into the self-care. I can draw on these experiences or these conversations, it feels really daunting. And it feels like what ends up happening, at least the theme that I see across all these conversations, is the less I feel worthy, the less I take care of myself. And then the more I am frustrated and possibly resentful because you see other people doing it and you don't understand, but it's a choice. It is because it doesn't have to be these big tasks. Like we said, it doesn't have to be the bubble bath. And, sometimes who has time for that? Because when I
Yeah.
think of the word bubble bath and associated with self-care, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, I got to clean my tub.
Yeah,
So now I have
same.
to work for the self-care when the truth is,
Yeah.
it's so much more than that. It's making the decisions in the moment. And I was thinking about, I mentioned a few minutes ago about not really understanding the deeper layers till later in life. And I think it didn't really hit until, I did my holistic nutritionist certification a couple years back. And it opened my world and my mind to taking care of my body from the nutritional standpoint. I went down the rabbit hole and I started to understand all of these things that would never, I knew I was eating well. I knew that I ate, was very particular. I haven't for many, many years prior to that, wasn't someone who poured junk into my body in general, though I'm really flexible with it. I'm not a super rigid person, but it wasn't until then that I started to really connect the dots. And then, like so many experiences, you start to understand it from a logical standpoint, and then you go through many evolutions or layers of starting to live it, make mistakes, experience it, learn new things, and start to little by little embody what it means to really, really practice holistic self-care, meaning, mind, body, soul, literally.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I mean, you've been with me on the journey from corporate America to non-corporate America, and it is for my self-care. I feel like universe just kept being like, you don't get it. You're not taking care of yourself.
Hmm.
And just started taking things away from me or creating situations where I had no other choice but to self-care. And we loop back around to your brain and the programming around self-care, right? And if you have those blocks of a massage is a luxury and is wasteful when some people can move serious trauma and have insane realizations of things because massages also are moving energy out of your body, and that can be stagnant energy, right? So, yes, we pay for it, it's a service, and it feels luxurious, and you go into that place and there is pampering to it, right? There's all of those things. And that self-care, I think oftentimes we forget about the deeper layers of the healing and their inner work around that self-care. And just when we commit to self-care, we are telling our brain, I'm worthy of protecting this body that my soul is in, this soul, this mind, this body.
Mhm.
And that just continues to radiate energetically for those around you. That's that whole you can't pour from an empty cup, right? When you are full, and self-care is a big part of that, and at your peak performance. I mean, we were talking peak performance, like we're athletes here going out
Yeah,
into the
yeah.
universe.
Well,
But like when we were just talking about all the technology things going on, and I was saying, oh, because it's been so wonky, self-care leads to, and you said, well, that's because our nervous systems aren't jacked up. When I said, I'm just happy that all of these little technology nuances, I'm grateful for the flexibility. And you were like, and the regulated nervous system,
yeah,
which
yeah.
plays a part in.
Yeah. So to the massage thing, right? Like for most people who are living in survival mode or don't have the time, the energy, and don't feel the deserving or all of the reasons, all the excuses, right? Like that's a big ask to go book yourself a massage, maybe. And also self-care, like any changes, taking care of yourself is most effective when practiced in small, regular actions over time.
Mm,
So sometimes the big massage is a treat and it's lovely. And doing it every 6 months or once a year isn't really self-care. That's when it becomes an indulgence because we're treating it like this, it's on a pedestal of it's a reward. I can go pay for the massage, but also like baby steps. Self-care. And when you think about massage, for me, it's a lot about self-massage because those are the small steps, but also there's something to there's a lot of people who are working to get comfortable with physical touch and with
yeah,
physical touch for themselves. And there's something really beautiful and loving and tender about being able to give yourself that. And so I think about, you know, Ayurvedic. Ayurveda really talks a lot about self-massage, which is called Abhyanga. And that was one of the first things when I started my holistic nutritionist program. I really got fascinated with Ayurveda because it's this ancient, I mean, and traditional Chinese medicine cultures have such deep ancient roots and so much wisdom and so many practices that now people are really catching on to. And it's, of course, becoming mainstream and maybe missing the point in a lot of ways. But being able to give yourself a massage, even if it's, I use my own example at nighttime. I always have something on my nightstand because I might massage my hands and just work out any kinks in my hands, or I might massage my feet, or I massage my own shoulders, right? I'm just a big proponent of I'm not going to wait for someone to give me the massage or to do it in the way that I can just show myself that love. And it could be literally a couple minutes before bed because I want to give myself that love and I want to set myself up for a good night's rest. And it's free and I can do it in a couple minutes. And those are the little steps, right? You set yourself up to be able to do it by putting something on the nightstand, by setting an alarm to go to wind down for bed. These are those little steps. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't need to be
yeah,
this reward. In fact, it shouldn't be a reward because you're not working for it. You need to function. You need to, so you need to take care of yourself. And I think that's really important. It's never about doing more, but it's about doing what you can with intention
yeah,
because self-care isn't indulgent. I think it's really about accountability and responsibility for your own well-being so that you can, if you're a person that really needs to pour into, if you're working through, I think a lot of people are working through people-pleasing tendencies, and that's
mm,
okay. It's learned, it's programming, it's part of how you survive to get where you are today. And sometimes it does take realizing that you have to please yourself in some ways. You have to take responsibility for your own well-being because that people pleasing just turns into resentment when you're not.
Well, and we live in this sacrificing society and in
Mm,
relationships, or there's this narrative around if you really love somebody, you'll sacrifice anything, right? Your life, sleep, your plans. It's that sacrifice. And that's where the people pleasing, I think, also comes in. And of course, self-care, obviously I use the massage as just a big example of
yeah.
a mindset of not necessarily the massage is the only thing with self-care. This is about
Mm.
mind, body, and soul. So I know we talk a lot about the physical. Yeah, I know when I had my big bang and I mean, mentally and physically, I don't know, I was in a whole different world. And I remember the one thing I told myself was do something every day, do something self-care every day
Hmm.
because you need to show the brain, the universe, your soul, that you are worthy of this care and this compassion. And what it looked like for me, honestly, for like the first 3 weeks, shave your legs every day in the shower. That was it. I mean, one, I got to escape a little bit in the shower, and that's also self-care, the water and cleaning energetically and being in your own space. But yeah, I'm not someone who shaves every single day my legs in the
I was like,
shower. A
wow.
girl, a girl doesn't have time for that, but that was a self-care practice it just was attention on my body. It wasn't about the shaving of the legs. It was about I was spending uninterrupted time doing something to take care of myself, which was I know helping my brain start to bring me back to life at that moment.
Yeah, well, and it's a good example, right? Shower time is like for a lot of people, it's one of the only times I would say, not for myself, right? I don't have children, but for a parent, maybe for a mother, sometimes maybe being in the shower is the only time you have alone, if you're very
Yeah,
fortunate, right? And so when I think about setting yourself up for success, knowing your lifestyle, right? It's like coaching 101. When you want to make a change, you need to consider all of the other outside elements that play a role in your daily life and don't try to set yourself up to make changes that don't already work within your environment and the people in your life because otherwise it's setting yourself up for disappointment. And so in the shower, so much can happen. It's like when people say my best ideas come in the shower because oftentimes you're like your brain gets to take a little bit of a pause and you can just kind of free flow. That creative mind can kind of flow a little
yeah,
bit more, but there's a lot that can happen in the shower. There's the ritual of cleansing, right? You can energetically visualize other people's projections and your stresses and whatever emotions you're holding on to. You can visualize washing them off your body. And that to me is super self-care. I also love a good face massage in the shower. So I do an at-home version and a non-aesthetic professional version of a buccal massage, which is it's just going in the inner layers of your inside of your mouth, which, really, when you see this done in a spa setting, the person has gloves because it's obviously your fingers are in their mouth. That's really unsanitary. But I love to do this in the shower. I love when I'm washing my face in the shower. I love to massage my jaw because where I hold a lot of tension. And I close my eyes and I just give myself that time because, and I'm not taking long showers. I got to pay for water too. And
yeah,
so it's about just using that time. And it's like, I hate to use this productivity term, but it's so real in this instance is that habit stacking, right? Like I'm already in the
yeah.
shower. So I'm already washing my face. So why don't I give myself a massage while I'm washing my face? Because not only does it feel good, not only is my face going to look snatched when I come out of the shower, but also I'm releasing tension that's built up and I don't need to hold on to it. So I really love that.
Well, it's making it so easy that you can't fail, right? If you know
Mhm.
you're showering, and I was also thinking about I know, and you can Google this, anyone who's interested, just I have started to incorporate through our conversations when I think about it is the lymphatic, just awakening those in the morning, like
Hmm.
rubbing on the lymphatic spots to get that all going. Not lymphatic, right? Under your armpits and under your
Yeah,
jaw. Yeah, yeah, your
yeah,
lymph nodes. That's the word I was looking for.
that's exactly.
Takes 20 seconds. And so that's the thing when we started out talking about this to-do list. I get it. I get it. One more thing. And people are always throwing advice out. You got a problem, you all solve it. Well, you should just do this thing. You should just do this thing. You should just do this thing. And I get it. But that next natural step, that's why things like when we were talking about the lymph nodes in the shower, that works for me because I shower a lot.
Hmm. Yeah, it's all individual to each person and what you need, what your life, what your days look like, what can you realistically do. And I want to touch on like these categories a little bit more in detail of, mental self-care, physical self-care, spiritual self-care, emotional self-care. I was looking at this article on not the program I went to. I went to AFPA, which is American Fitness Professionals and Associates or something. That was the program I took. But IIN, which is Integrative into Nutrition or what have you, which is probably the most popular program that a lot of people go through. A lot of board certified holistic nutritionists, wellness coaches, et cetera, tend to go here. But I read this article by this woman, Lisa Drennan. It was a blog and it is talking about holistic self-care. And I love that she kind of went through and talked about just these four categories and things, she talks about with mental self-care. And this is all stuff we've talked
Will you
about:
repeat those four just again?
mental self-care, physical, spiritual, and emotional. And with mental self-care, she talks about mindfulness, right? Of course, mindfulness and all of these words. I mean, this is a soapbox I don't need to get on, but thinking about social media and trends and how rapid things move and how quickly things become buzzwords and then they sort of lose their potency to talk about them, which is really unfortunate because they're very important topics like mindfulness. And again, a lot of these I think can be really overwhelming or feel like these big rocks to move, but truly it can happen in seconds, in minutes. It's just about giving yourself what you need and what you can fit in. But it is about presence. And from a cardiovascular point of view, it does support your heart health because your mind and your heart and your body aren't moving at different paces, which is where a lot of us are. It's bringing it all back into yourself. And so it does support your heart health. It supports your ability to focus, which is, God, our focus is our greatest currency right now because it is so spread thin, again, with these 15-second highlight reels. And they're really great in a sense for some of us who need that. I think about manifesting generators. We
Yeah.
do sometimes function on the quick hits of information. And also, it's training our brains to just constantly move on instead of stopping and being present and being where our feet are, literally being where we are. So mindfulness is so key in whatever way you get it. If it's breathing into your body for a few seconds, do it. But it's so, so important. I think I've mentioned this before, but every single morning, the first thing I do is I hold my hand on my heart. And if I remember, I put my other hand on my belly. But I always say to myself, I am safe, I'm secure, I'm enough, and I am so loved, and I have so much love to give. And I say this to myself every single morning, and it's so real and it feels so good. It started out as a task, truly as a to-do list of like, I don't want to look at my phone. I don't want to care about what's going on in the outside world.
Yeah.
I want to care about what I have right here in this moment every single day. And doing it every day, making it a habit, that small step has totally shifted my mornings. And I'm seeing the ripple effects in the way that I show up for my partner, the way that I show up for myself. It's like you don't notice the change until it happens one day and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I have been doing this every single day without fail. This one thing, and I am so not a consistent person, but this is one thing I'm really consistent in for the last few months. And then I see that I'm waking up more gracious. I'm waking up less selfish. I'm waking up wanting to do for my husband so that he can go to his day and feel good so that he can then come home and pour love into like it's just such a
Yeah.
feedback and it starts with that little step of mindfulness in the morning and I fall off meditation all the time. I do, but this is important to me and I think about that. One of the other things in this article was to unplug regularly, so disconnecting from technology on a
Hmm.
regular basis. And I really love this one. And I was looking for quotes about this. And I read this quote by the novelist Anne Lamott. And she says, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. And it's so real, right? Because if you've ever
It
worked in
is
any
so
type of
true.
environment, like where you have like everyone, like, you have the IT
Yeah.
department and they're like, did
Have
you
you tried
unplug
turning it
it?
off and back on real quick?
And honestly, it works for almost everything. Like
It works for a
literally
lot. Yeah.
almost everything. You can turn it off and turn it back on, unplug it, and it will restart. And I think that is it makes you laugh. And hopefully, because it's a funny thing to think about, it sticks with you because it's so real.
Yeah. I've one of the things for self-care that has really been on my radar, probably for the last year or so, is turning technology off at a certain time. And now I will say
Yeah,
that the majority of the time it does happen. I really made this year the year of sleep and rest and making sure that my body is getting that. I know it's so good for me mentally, physically, spiritually, all of the things. And so what I started to do was electronics off at 9.
yeah.
And that put me in a position where what are you going to do at that time?
Hmm.
And it gets me into reading, meditating, journaling, going to bed earlier, getting up earlier. I mean, there are some times where it doesn't always happen, but to your point of once you start doing it and then you get clarity, the one thing about mornings that I've really realized is that I fucking hate a get up and rush.
Of
Now it
course.
does like, and I know that sounds so cliche, but I've always been someone who I like a morning, I like to get up, I like to move, I like to do
Hmm.
things. But what I've realized is that I like to do it on my own time frame. And that has, I think, just really changed. And when I was really busy freelancing and seeing my hours shifting, I could just physically feel like the anxiety starting to creep up, the lack of patience starting to creep up. I was, giving myself a lot of grace, but it was that reality of sleep or work out today. And I know that movement and sleep is both important. And so, yeah, I was thinking a lot of that, and I get a lot of inspiration from your morning too. And while mine doesn't look just the same, I've given myself a little bit of leeway of getting up. It's like wake up, and then you've got another alarm because you also, I don't want to get sucked into, you could just lay in bed, and now's the season too. Now's the cozy bed season. So I don't want to do that, but just giving myself a little bit extra of that time and just breath in bed to get up
Yeah.
and not feel like having to rush and get ready and on like a time frame has been beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. It's the doing it with intention, right? Like if you it's cozy when we're in the, fall. I don't want to say winter yet because I don't want to rush us into winter, but it's getting colder. And maybe you do want to stay in bed for a few more minutes or you do want to be cozy, but I think it's the intention behind it. Can you do some breath work while you're laying? Can you stretch your body and slowly wake up? Because that's self-care too. One of the other tips that she talks about under mental health self-care is spending quality time with a pet, which obviously you don't have pets and you're not a dog person in the way that I am sickly obsessed with my dogs. But, from a health and psychology standpoint, it actually can help with your sleep, which is quite funny because so often I'm like, I can find myself like contorted into strange positions because my dogs are taking up so much space. But it lowers anxiety, it boosts your mood, and I can truly say that's so true. I mean, when I wake up in the mornings and I snuggle with my dogs and I tell them I love them so much, it is like my heart, you can physically feel the expansion. I can feel like this living embodiment of gratitude, not just acknowledging the gratitude, but feeling it, which is the key to gratitude, right? It's about savoring it, not just writing it down. But that's so true. And the last thing she says is give yourself a creative outlet, which I think is so real. And I want to talk more about this later too. But giving yourself, I think a lot of people are starting to talk more about lately how creativity is not reserved solely for the talented artists that are out there in the world. We all have our potential for creativity. It's just going to express it differently. And it doesn't always have to be about performance. It doesn't have to be something that you
Put
show
the
the world.
tangibility around things.
Yeah, it could
Yeah.
be waking up and dancing, and it could be having a hobby, whatever that looks like. The
My best
physical.
friend the other
Yeah.
day told me because I use music a lot for self-care and like a lot of things, but she was like, okay, fuck you. Because I had sent her these songs and she was just like, it opened up the floodgates
Mm,
for the spot she was in. But it was taking that alone time because music to me is meditation. It's my praying, which is that spiritual aspect of it. Her and I were just talking back and forth, and I'd sent her a playlist or something. Yeah, music's a cool one to open you up to that self-care, mental spirituality, and just moving your freaking body too.
yeah, I think so. I also think it's worth saying for music to be really intentional about the music you listen to because, you know, if you're in a place, maybe an emotional low, or maybe you're not in emotional low, but you're listening to music where the words, the frequency are not supportive, but you're just listening to it because it's unconscious, right? I think that's really something that people don't talk about enough. We talk about frequency, we talk about hertz and things like that when it comes to sound and music, which is so real.
Yeah.
There's science behind it. And also we don't necessarily, I think, talk about lyrics as much. And this is kind of veering off the self-care, but in a way it kind of isn't because if
Well, it's
you're
your
not
environment.
paying attention to the lyrics and it's something that is like, if it's super depressing and you're like, why am I so sad? Well, maybe it's time to switch up the frequency of the words because words are such powerful spells that we cast. And when we're singing along and we're singing about heartbreak all the time and we're experiencing heartbreak in our lives all the time, maybe it's an opportunity for more awareness, which could be very much self-care. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And then when she talks about physical care, it's the things we just don't think about, or we do. Some people do. It's the staying hydrated, prioritizing sleep, going outside,
I know.
vitamin D, nature, clarity. I think I probably have brought this up before, but there's that concept of forest bathing that was pioneered, from Japan because so many people were experiencing deep, deep depression and, this living to work mentality and culture in some ways, and going out and just staring at the trees. I am so lucky to have, nature all around me where I live. And it is, especially in the fall season, you have to give yourself as much as you possibly can. So I use when I walk my dogs, and especially in fall, the number of times I have cried on walks because the
Yeah.
leaves change and I just look around and I think, my gosh, this is so beautiful. This is God. This is magic. And I'm so lucky to witness it. And then I just get emotional because it's so beautiful. And I know that you can probably look up from Psychology Today. You can probably search a lot of articles that talk about the idea of being in awe, what that does to your brain, giving yourself moments of just pure awe. And
Hmm.
it can happen just by looking outside and realizing, like, I think it just puts things into perspective when you see the changing seasons, but especially this season and living in the state of New York on the East Coast. We're so fortunate that we get to see these changing seasons. And there's something that really makes you realize how small you are in the grand scheme of the world when you witness this. And it also makes you realize that everything comes in seasons because the seasons are going to change no matter what. So no matter what is going on in your life, nothing is permanent. And it forces you to be present, which I really, really love. And the last
Hmm.
thing about physical care is moving your body.
Yeah, back to the walks. I have started incorporating what I've deemed whisper walks, which all that means I'm by myself, no
Mhm.
conversations, no phone, no music playing, no nothing, and just walking and really observing. And I keep going back to that presence. And
Yeah.
that is a goal of mine is every day just to get outside and go for a walk. And, on the days I just don't feel like it, it's a 5-minute walk, right? Because you
Hmm.
just continue to tell yourself to do it. I was watching, oh, may she always be revered. I was watching an interview of the late Diane Keaton now.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just talking about, she's like, you just think about life and you look at things. And I'm sharing this because this has started to give me a new perspective on my whisper walk, which I think again leaves me in that awe phase, piggybacking on what you were talking about. She starts talking to one of the people working on the set of her interview, and she's, look at this man over here. Like this man got up, made an intention, and just got really curious. And she's like, these pants, like, why did he wear these pants? How did he grow up? And that was so Diane Keaton, so present and so
Yeah.
just curious about the world. And so I've started to, on the Whisper Walks, do that and
Mm-hmm.
just be super observant. The other thing that is cool that I do sometimes that I can't remember for the life of me now where I picked this up from was I think it was meant to help with anxiety, but find all the pink things. So when you're outside walking, like picking a color and starting to look, and that can also help you be really present and kind of get back in your body.
Yeah, yeah. It's like activating your senses when people
Hmm.
are going through, high stress or maybe an anxiety attack, kind of calming yourself by
Yeah.
noticing things that you can see, that you can touch, you can feel, you can taste. And I think the curiosity, I don't know that this can ever be said enough, is the more open we are, the more curious we are, the less room we have to judge. And I think judgment is a big thing that gets in the way of self-care and self-love and self-acceptance, right? Because we're judging whether it be ourselves or what we are or aren't doing enough of, and we're judging other people or things in our lives. But the more curious we can be, the more present we can be, the more open. And that's really, really important. And you mentioned something earlier about sacrifice. And I think that the moment you realize that we are always sacrificing something, whether we
Yeah.
choose to consciously or we're doing it unconsciously, right? If I am living in a state of survival and I am choosing to wake up and be rushed and get out the door and do all the things, right? And choosing to live in that state of rush and urgency, I should say, I'm sacrificing a lot of things, but I'm choosing that. So the more aware we are that we're always going to sacrifice. So even if we think on the other end of the spectrum that giving ourselves time to care, to tend to our body, our mind, our soul, even in short doses, we think that we can't do those things because we're sacrificing other aspects of our lives. You're sacrificing no matter what. So you get to choose, what do I want to sacrifice? Do I want to sacrifice my well-being? Do I want to sacrifice my inner peace, my ability to love myself? Or am I going to keep or do I want to sacrifice this guilt that I've been holding on to? Because I'm ready to sacrifice that and offer that up in exchange for something different. And so I think that's really something important to notice. And the last thing on the physical is the body, moving your body. And, I've been on a new journey of movement and being really in devotion to my body since June. So it's relatively new. Like I've cared about my body, but I haven't been one to just physically, I hated cardio because I have big boobs. It was uncomfortable. And so I avoided it like the plague. But starting in June, just building up this small habit, I was trying, experimenting, trial and error in so many ways. Like there were weeks where I was like, okay, I'm going to do 10 minutes every day. That's it. That's all I'm going to commit to. There were weeks where I was like, I'm going to work out 3 to 4 days a week this week, and I'm going to do a 30-minute class or whatever the thing is, right? I've just tried different things because the point wasn't that I stick with a routine and it becomes my life, because I know that that's the fastest way for me to not want to do it anymore, but that I make it a habit to just care about my physical body and care really deeply about aging well and just honoring that I have this one go round as Michelle and this one physical body, and I deserve it. And so recently I started doing the class, which I think I told you about. I started doing the class and I started taking these. Now I'm jumping into the live classes, which are 60 minutes, and I'm doing a couple of times a week. But what I notice is, and I've experienced this before, but maybe not to this in a long time, is this full mind body connection in the class, because the class itself incorporates a lot of different, it's dynamic movement, it's high intensity, it's getting your heart rate up and then slowing it down, which is so important for cardiovascular health. It's yoga movement, so it's a good blend, it's dance, it's a lot of different things. But in yesterday's class, the instructor was incredible and it feels truly like moving meditation. And there were so many instances yesterday where my eyes welled up and I'm moving and I'm like, and it's sound, right? So it's voice, it's sound therapy. So as you're doing a burpee, right? Which, first of all, never in my life would I do a burpee. I freaking hate that. That is
I know we were
disgusting
talking
to
about
me.
burpees.
Like, what the hell? But I'm doing them because of the way that they build up to it. It feels like I'm capable of it. So I feel confident. That's part of it. And I think the confidence comes from the baby steps of building up to a habit of just doing it. And as you jump up from the burpee, you're like every single time. So I'm literally like screaming, and this physical and vocal release, my eyes are tearing up and I'm like laughing because it's so joyous because I'm like, oh my God, this release feels so good right now. And so it started to connect in such a way that really now feels like a necessary part of how I care about my body. And it's really beautiful and I love it. And I had to mention in this physical aspect of self-care because, I have always been the person that's like, I'm not going to the gym, this is not for me. Mind you, I don't see myself becoming, a fitness model or anything like that, but I feel really good. And it
Yeah.
feels so therapeutic and so cleansing to move your body powerfully. And, through the class, this instructor yesterday, there were so many moments. It's like she's very intuitive, I think. And every time you feel like, oh, this is getting hard, she's like, I love you, body. I love you, heart. I love you, body. I love you, heart. And I'm like saying it out loud to myself. So I'm giving myself that same validation to keep going. And then there's the confidence and there's the feeling proud of yourself for sticking it out. And there's just so many different moving parts in that act of moving my body that I'm really, really grateful to experience and to have the freedom to build that habit. And I started small. That's, I think, the most important thing. I started really freaking small and I started with a lot of resistance and a lot of, dragging my feet. And so it's not impossible. And I'm doing a lot of jumping jacks, which, a year ago, 6 months ago, if you told me to do a jumping jack, I would have shut the door on you, like I would have been like, no, no.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it comes full circle into self-care is all of those things. You are in that state of you're tending to your mind, body, and spirit when you're in that. And I can relate. And I've had conversations the last couple of days too, where moms specifically, the sentiment was a little bit like, I'm just kind of sick of people being like, well, just don't watch that TV show at night that you watch. And they're like, what TV show? I'm a mom.
Mm,
And I think that goes back to what you were saying is it's like all of these habits, it's starting small. Of course, it seems impossible, but it's just really starting small. I want to share a cool story because I have a friend who is postpartum and she's really wanting to get her body moving again. And she was just, I may have 10 or 15 minutes a day. And honestly, what I need to prioritize is my pelvic floor because she's
mm-hmm,
got postpartum stuff going on. So for her, it's not about trying to find the class like you, right? She's got very intentional. And I think about how universe just is so beautiful and comes into play because I have a coaching client who is getting her Pilates
mm,
certification. And she reached out and was like, I have a favor. I have to get my teaching hours and I da 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 da. And she's like, honestly, it's not going to be like half hour, probably just right now as I'm getting started, like 10, 15 minutes. And I was like, wait, do you do postpartum stuff? And she's like, I can. So now she is collaborating with my friend to help her. And
mm,
it's this beautiful story because I think about how there's always limitations to self-care, right? And even just aside from the blocks and the programming, but the intent was so strong with my friend to like, she knew what she needed, and we just don't see how that fits in. And here there is an instructor
mm-hmm.
who can be flexible, who, if they schedule for 10 and the baby hasn't gone down for a nap, it's not like you're wasting $35 for a class because your child had a different schedule.
Yeah.
So she's still gonna get that self-care. And I think that's just beautiful. When we set the intention, just it's tough because we get really busy and we have a lot going on and it can seem impossible. But
Hmm.
again, it is just that little piece to your point that you were talking about.
Yeah, yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah.
So to keep going on this thread, spiritual self-care, surprise, meditation, right?
Yeah.
I hear people say things like, I know I need to meditate more. And sometimes I like to respond with, do you? Why do you need to, right? Because we're making it now a task and something that I have to do. And I think we can talk about the benefits, right? Emotional regulation, builds focus, calm, all of those things. But if you don't feel a real intrinsic motivation of why it's important to you, then it kind of, I think, defeats the purpose. But I do think meditation is really important, but that can look a lot of different ways. I think that for some people, for a lot of people, you can also talk about prayer in lieu of meditation. You can talk about, a lot of different things. Breath work,
Ritual.
or a ritual. But I think that spiritual self-care at the end of the day is just finding whatever connects you to something greater than yourself, be it going out in nature, experiencing that sensation of awe, and, connecting with your dogs in the morning, right? Like this is all
I
interconnected.
think about volunteering, even just like
Hmm.
little things like that, just the expansiveness of
Yeah.
something bigger, greater out there than yourself.
Yeah. Giving back to your community. And especially in the wild and very, very devastating world around us. It can feel completely out of your control. And for a lot of people, feel very helpless because they don't know what else to do, what they can do. And as somebody who does a lot of community work locally, I can tell you that doing that work, it provides you that connection. It opens your world, right? Because not only do you realize that even when people are busy and whenever everyone's busy, everyone is addicted to busy, whether you actually are or not. I mean, that's my cold hard truth. And when people are, I'm so busy, I'm like, really? Well, I know people who are CEOs of major companies making multi-millions of dollars and they still find time for their family and they still find time to sit down and have a meaningful conversation with their child. So, like, I know that people are busy, but I think we use it as an excuse far too often. And it's one of those excuses to take us away from doing other things. And, volunteering, doing community work, it just puts things into perspective, but it gives you a semblance of connection. Like I actually can do something of meaning. And that is outside of myself, that's in service to people who, even though, I may have my own shit going on, there's still someone else out there that really needs support and doesn't have the resources that I have, doesn't know the people that I do, and all of the things, right? And it's so simple that I think people just don't do it. And there's a lot of things you can look up no matter where you live, whether you're in a big city, probably even more opportunities. And right now, especially, there's a lot. I think about all of the cuts to government funding, to food stamps, to all of these programs. I guarantee you can go online, you can find a local community refrigerator, you can find a local pantry. And there are, even where I live in Dutchess County, there are so many food pantries and they are all at capacity of people that they serve, which tells us that there is such a need. There is such a great food insecurity issue here in this beautiful farm-filled, abundant area of the Hudson Valley that I live in. And there's still a lot of people who are hungry all the time, and there's going to be a lot more hungry people. And so when you feel helpless and when you feel like sometimes, and maybe you're a person who is addicted to people pleasing, and maybe this is an opportunity to channel that need to be of service into something that actually gives back to you instead of just pouring and pouring into others that don't give back to you. And it's really beautiful, but there's so many opportunities. And I use the fridge example because we have a community refrigerator in our library here. And it's really easy to find one thing that you can give. You don't have to stock the fridge. That's a big ask. Maybe you can't even afford to. That's fair. But could you, like if we're going out of town or something and I think of like, oh my God, I have vegetables like these. an easy way to donate, to give, or you make too much food, set aside some of it and just put it in a container. Like in our library, we provide takeout containers so people can come in, take the takeout containers and go make prepared meals at home and donate it to the fridge. And it's these little doable tasks. Again, everything in baby steps of what you can actually do. But that giving back is so critical, I think, for forever, but especially for the world we live in, because there's just so many things that are out of your control. And if I'm being totally honest, there's only so much that reposting online can do to help situations that you've got to actually take an action and go do something where you're of service in whatever way that you can. And yeah, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to find a local food pantry that doesn't need volunteers, even for one shift, a couple hours to pack boxes. And we're coming up on that season too, like Thanksgiving, holiday season. These are busy times. So there's a lot of opportunity.
Fine line between reality and excuses. I understand that. And I think in the most simplistic way, because when you think about people out there working multiple jobs, even just driving to a food pantry, maybe they don't have a car, maybe they don't have gas money, maybe it's not accessible. Take a walk around your block and pick up trash. Look a neighbor in the
Yeah.
eye, ask them how they're doing, right?
Hmm.
There is so many ways. And I think that with self-care to me always seemed like it had to be such a luxury or an effort or a lot of time commanding, right? And yes, it's not to dissuade anyone from looking at your local food pantries and doing that if you feel called to do that. And for those of you who might be thinking, or this triggers in you, yeah, that's nice, but again, when and that's far. Self-care and in the spiritual realm of things higher than you, again, can be. Last night, I literally went out and watched my neighbors doing Diwali and just said happy Diwali to them. And
Hmm.
that is just creating community. And so there's lots of ways to really look at that self-care and spirituality. What else
Yeah, yeah.
comes up for you in this realm?
No, I think that's like a lot of spiritual self-care and, being connected to something outside of yourself. And it's fascinating to think about this, right? Because self-care, you're deconstructing the idea that you need to look outside of yourself to fill that void of care and self-love. And when you talk about spiritual self-care, it's a different frequency. It's like looking outside of yourself in your own circumstances of I'm so busy and I don't have this and it's all the lack and what I don't have, what I can't do, instead of considering what can I actually do? What is in my control? And that to me is self-care of taking control over what you can and not being kind of a victim to the everyday because so much of it is life. No, I think it's a really disservice to ourselves when we wake up and we think that life is supposed to give us things and be fair to us. We have to step up and be a part of our own solution as well and take care of ourselves and have our own back. And so the last thing on emotional self-care, talk to a therapist, a coach, a mentor, right? Getting support is key. Again, to the interconnectedness of it all, the spiritual, the looking outside of yourself, the connecting to something greater, be it the community or people around
It's funny,
you.
but it's like we're coaches, we're like, yeah, it's like get you a therapist, get you,
Well, that's
yeah.
exactly it. When you look back on with certain people, and I put in my last newsletter, I was going back through a transcript from a session, and the person had said, I've stopped chasing approval. And that in itself was huge because I thought, how incredible to see this in writing, in a transcript, what
Yeah.
someone said of the work that we've done over time. And it's been a year that I've been working with this person. And oftentimes in coaching, we want the rapid fix, we want the quick fix. We want to say, I can work with you, and in 3 months, you're going to do X, Y, Z. And that's great because that can certainly happen. But where's the finish line? Like, what's the race? Where are we? Why are we still feeding into this urgency of I need to get this done? Because the real changes take time, and chasing approval could be a something you've held on to for your entire life. So how naive of us to think that we can just stop that. I'm not a hypnotist. And so, I think it's really beautiful to talk about wanting support into the the being connected, we just don't do life alone. We're not here alone. So it's really also narrow-minded to think about I live in and exist alone and I can do it all myself, because that's part of the challenge and the problem is thinking that you need to do it all yourself. Maybe part of it is that you just went to the wrong people for validation and for advice or for support for so long and didn't get what you actually needed, that you started to believe that you didn't need any help and needed to do it yourself. And so talking to someone whose job is to hold the space for you, is to reflect back to you helping you see and clear the field of all the other crap that's there, that's getting in the way of you connecting to your own truth and your own self. And some other things with the emotional, that we've talked about, journaling, right? Like just processing for yourself. I don't journal every day anymore, but I do love the idea of sitting down and writing, because it is processing, but it's also just hard to lie to yourself on the page. It's really hard to bullshit yourself. And so the more truthful you can be in those moments, and that's why journals and diaries are private, because it's where we get to be real and honest. And it's really difficult, I think, to consider what healing and what self-care can look like if we're not being honest with ourselves. And also the writing, if you do it regularly enough, however, whatever that looks like for you, you can spot patterns in your life and you can start to deconstruct the patterns that are not supporting you in the ways that you need. And what else?
I think what is so interesting about self-care is as we're talking about it, my brain just goes, self-care is just the thing at the surface that takes you down to the roots of blocks and things that are keeping you from your self-trust, your self-worth, all of the things. Because even when I think about emotional self-care, that is very nuanced to what each person might need. And I love that you give examples of different ways to do it, right? That's therapy. It's that emotional regulation, making sure that we're caring for the emotional state of being. And yet again, here, I think is that theme that seems to be woven through this conversation is really figuring out what works for you and in your life and letting that be your guide. Because I think
Yeah.
about every time I think about like therapy, coaches, it doesn't mean that those are the only solutions to emotional regulation. Community is really big for me. Safe community is really important for me with my emotional self-care, not gaslighting my emotional self-care, really honoring my emotions, having spaces where I'm allowed to say. That's what I kind of think about there. It just feels like this bubble of wanting to just take care of that vulnerability of yourself and that emotional side. And so, what does self care look like for you? And I think for me in this space, it's like surrounding myself with the people who help curate my highest good and growth
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't mean my self-care is I get to say exactly how I feel because I'm sharing my emotions because these are my emotions. It's not about that. It's about, being able to express in a safe place and just honor and go through. And not all roads always have to lead back to human design. But I think, for the emotional authorities out there, it's an ongoing, everyday kind of present thing for me just to emotionally take care of
Mm-hmm.
that self-care with emotions. So not gaslighting, not pushing them down, the emotions down, like really letting yourself feel, really naming the emotions. And that work can come in a lot of different ways. So you list a couple of practitioners or modalities, and to me, it also can look like who you surround yourself with, how you
Mm-hmm.
honor your emotions.
Yeah, nurturing the positive relationships in your life. And I think the more that you do that, the less room you have for those relationships that maybe do not support your where you're headed or your emotional state. And it's yeah, I think it's prioritizing the people that really, really uplift you and ground you. And the other one is, radical self-care, which is can look like boundaries and all of the things, stillness, deep rest, but I think boundaries is a big one in terms of that radical self-care. And it's, to me, boundaries in that context is about having your own back. And so I really love that article. And what else do we want to talk about? I have another kind of Another article that from Psychology Today that I really liked too, that talks about the four C's of self-care.
I think that's good. What are the four C's?
Yeah, this is from Psychology Today. And it's a framework for sustainable self-care habits, and especially when life feels full. So the number one is consciousness. So it's being aware. So having awareness as the first step in self-care. If any, even in therapy, awareness is often the first step. Awareness is kind of the first step in any change, right? How do you know what needs to change? How do you need to know what needs to happen if you have no awareness of it? And so awareness and tuning into your feelings, what you need, what you're avoiding. I think about the saying, it's the magic you're looking for is in the work you are avoiding. It's usually accredited to this guy, Deepan Parmar. I don't know what he does, but he said these really smart words. There's not a lot of information I could find out about him, but that's fine. This is, the quote says enough. And I think that's really true. Oftentimes, it's the thing that you're avoiding that you really, really need to do that is the best act of self-care you can do. It's like anything. I think about financial self-care, right? The things you're avoiding. What are you avoiding? Where are you putting your head in the sand? Because that's where the work is. That's where the real magic lies in the things that you're running from. And also, it's like the concept of running from and running towards. And we talk about that in coaching as well. But, with the consciousness, it's am I acting on autopilot or am I acting in alignment with what I need, what I'm avoiding, what I'm feeling? And I think it's that conscious tie-in with things like mindful nutrition or mindful eating, mindful lifestyle habits or choices. And so taking it back to all of those areas of physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, it's like, am I choosing food that I can choose, right? Everyone has different resources and different things available to them, but am I choosing with what I can, with what I have available to me, things that make me feel good or satiated, or am I just going to feel like crap?
Hmm.
Am I creating rituals or routines that actually reflect who I am, not maybe what I think I should be doing or what this influencer is doing that looks good? She looks great. So let me follow her. Let me do the cold plunge every day, even though I might just be racking my nervous system even more because the cold plunge isn't for me. I mean, think about all of the different, varying opinions, right? And I'm using the cold plunge example, even though it's, in the consciousness, but I think consciousness and discernment go so hand in hand together, discerning what is right for me. And just like everything that we've talked about, this through line through everything with self-care is it's so bio-individual. It's to you. What do you need? It's different than what I need. And I'm such a big proponent of options. I need to have options because I need to be able to choose what feels right, but have options so that I don't skip on it. But the cold plunge is a fascinating one because you look at all the people out there that are like, yeah, you got to do the ice in your face in the ice bowl, and you got to take the cold plunge right after the red light sauna. Well, first of all, that shit's really expensive, except for the ice bowl. Fine, everybody can find, maybe not everyone, but most people can find some ice and some filtered water. But one, it's been now shown through studies, through scientific studies, that for women, ice plunges and cold baths aren't actually really good for our hormones. So, and then you go back to, again, these ancient lineages, these ancient systems like traditional Chinese medicine that will tell you you shouldn't be doing the cold plunge. So you have to come back to your own truth, right? Back to the mindfulness of coming back to yourself and that consciousness and the discernment of how do I actually feel when I do this? Does it feel right? Or does it feel like I'm doing it because I think I'm supposed to because someone else told me and they look great and they're an expert, I think, because, who isn't an expert online nowadays, even though it's kind of scary. Yeah, being conscious of what works for you, not what you think you should do. So consciousness.
So what's the second C?
So compassion, which kind of feels like really, really important, right? Can I meet myself with the same softness that I give to others? And, that's that a mirror. Emotional and spiritual nourishment. Also, compassion allows you to integrate. It helps your body to relax, your mind to soften. The third one is courage, because it takes courage to set boundaries, to say no, to prioritize rest. And I think it takes courage to confront these long held beliefs that we have about what we should and shouldn't be doing. or these long held habits to stop them and to actually look at ourselves and understand why have I been doing this thing for so many years that actually doesn't support me. And so from a holistic point of view, courage is energetic self-preservation.
When you brought up courage, Brene Brown just jumped into my brain
Mhm.
and she quotes FDR, but the concept I always think about with that is people are going to have a lot to say, but you're not in the arena. You're not in here doing the thing,
Mhm.
doing the work. And that to me is that courage is like it's courageous to get in there and peel back the layers and prioritize self-care. And there will be a lot of opinions on the outside, but I think back to her with that. It's that courage piece, and that has kind of shifted it for me of the mentality of like, well, I don't want your life. And it's not that I'm not interested in people's opinions, but people have a lot of opinions about what everyone does in life. And so it is that get in the arena, get in the dirt, do the things. Like if you're courageous, I'm willing to listen and go at this with you. But if you're just sitting in the sidelines of the arena watching everybody else kind of be courageous, and I'm uninterested
Yeah, yeah.
in how you want to tell me to, in this instance, provide self-care to myself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's boundaries, that's
Yeah.
boundaries with yourself of whose opinion matters to me and why. And will I let that keep me up at night or will I, protect my peace in the most loving way possible? And the last one is commitment. And we've said this enough, but those small actions repeated often, that's what creates the long-term resilience. And I think resilience is something we haven't talked about, but that's really important when it comes to self-care because life happens. This is life. Nobody, we didn't sign up to live in, I don't know, Smurfsville. Like it should
I
happen.
wish. All that stuff that seems so obvious and it's been the through line, but it's the practicality of it and it's executing on it for what makes it yours, right? And I feel like I reference our, what was it, small steps, big leaps episode a lot because it's like that goal setting 101. And even when you're in self-care, to your point, Michelle, you didn't say, well, I have this intent of taking care of my body as I age, so I'm going to jump in 7 days a week. I'm going to go
Hmm.
join the class. And for some people, listen, have a go at it. But that self-care, it's the habitualness of
Hmm.
it's, are you remembering when you wake up to put your hand on your heart and your stomach and just acknowledge yourself? When
Hmm.
you're in the shower, are you remembering just do that lymphatic quick massage, right? And I'm giving examples very my life as well, but yeah, then where can we be flexible in that to support our own self-care? Because I'm like a 7 day a week active workout girl, and I had to also in the self-care look back and are you getting enough rest? Are you putting in your body what you need to be putting in your body? What are you sacrificing from prioritizing the movement piece, the body piece of self-care? And
Yeah.
so really for me and how very Libra season as we're recording to start thinking about the balance. It really is a balance of all of those is important, which is why I love that you found the class and I love finding movements that tie all four of those self-care elements together. And that can look very, very different.
Yeah, I think to the personalizations, and to self-care being a value for Karmic Mirror, it's what are the habits that reflect your own values? What is important to you? And using your workout example, it's like, and not, and I'm saying for other people, perhaps maybe it's like maybe work, the 7 days a week really, really worked for someone, not you, right? But, and then realizing, why am I doing this? Like, am I doing it because I felt the pressure to be XYZ or what have you? Or am I doing it because after I do it, I feel freaking amazing and I feel good and I rest better, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It just matters to you. Does it reflect what your values are, what matters to you? Because that's the only one that matters. And also your environment, right? Like what's practical? What are the other variables or the other players in your life that you need to be considerate of as well? Because we don't, we have to coexist. And so I think the question that comes up is that I had pulled up is, what would it look like if you treated self-care as a conversation with your whole self, one where you listen and respond and honor what's needed in the moment. And I think
Yeah.
that's a beautiful place to start because it might just be a hand on the heart and on the belly and a deep breath because maybe that's all you can commit to and that's okay.
Mm,
You start somewhere and let that be enough because the more we start to layer on these expectations for ourselves, it's like the more we get away from the whole point of it, of
yeah.
caring. It's caring for ourselves and it's caring for ourselves in the way that we might for the person that we love the most in our lives. And oftentimes it's not ourselves. We realize there's other people we place before ourselves, but if you can start to turn the lens back, okay, well, what would I tell this person? We use that in coaching too. What would you tell, the person you love the most? What would you tell your child in this
Yeah.
moment? Well, can you give yourself that same compassion, that same message, like the four C's of, with the compassion piece? What else? What
Yeah, I
else?
think with just that compassion piece and just to maybe put a bow on this conversation here was that certainly I didn't just end up being a 7 day a week workout lady. Really, where that started for me in my early 30s was you're going to go run 2 times this week, no excuses. And
Mm,
that is how this journey has led here, and that compassion and also that flexibility, because when I was bonus momming, maybe it didn't look like my 30 minutes of getting on the Peloton for the day. Maybe I just let it be okay that I was running around with the girls and we were playing soccer that day. And
yeah.
that was my movement. So it's also, I think it's just that like creating habit and habitualness, which feels good. I know we've talked a lot about kind of some of those self-care practices that we've implemented this year. I'm wondering if you had any self-care mantras. You've thrown out a lot of beautiful quotes that I've been jotting down along the way, but any mantras you use to remind yourself to prioritize self-care or in this realm?
The one that comes up when you asked is, on the other side of resistance is flow. And I love that saying a lot because there's so many things in my life that I can pinpoint even down to the last few weeks. It's a constant unraveling of this, where in my life I am so resistant. And when I move through it, when I can come to it with acceptance, I really do find more flow, more peace, more care. And I mean that in every aspect. For me, the big theme has been in relationship, especially with my husband. And there are a lot of things I find myself resistant to. And I won't go into detail, but there's a really funny example. So, we have friends that that have been our long, long friends. And I won't go into too much detail because it's not necessary. But for example, a good friend came over this weekend and he was like, "Whoa, those plants in the window are really suffering." And I was like, "Oh my God, they were having a moment." And this has been it seems so silly, but it isn't. We have a lot of plants in my house. And when we started this plant experience several years ago, my husband was always the one to take care of them. I mean, I'm the one who bought the first plant, and it was a pothos, which is really, really easy to keep. It just requires very little. But for whatever reason, he just had a really instant green thumb and it came very naturally to him. And he was so good at them, at taking care of the plants. And I just kind of let him do his thing. Like, why do I need to involve myself? One person can manage the plants, right? We had one at the time, and then we started to build, and then as often happens when you start into plants, and the next thing you know, your house is filled with plants. And when we moved here, we have a bigger house than we did in our apartment, and we got more plants. And my husband is always working. He works a lot in multiple areas, and and thrives in work. And so then the plants kind of fell on me. And I have had a real love-hate relationship with them because on one hand, I'm like, yeah, I'm a witch. I should be good at this, right? I should like just be really natural
This
at this,
should,
right? I
yeah.
manifested this incredible garden in my house as well. I have a gorgeous, thriving garden outside. It's something I called in and
Look at me,
don't
Green
know.
Witch. I can't fail.
And I didn't know
Yeah.
what the hell. Well, yeah, and I would never even think like I can't fail. I just like I never, but I but I wanted this. I had a dream for the garden I wanted, but I
Yeah.
didn't have any practical understanding or motivation to care for it. I just had this dream of what it would be to have this garden and all these plants. But then they started dying and the garden got overwhelming. And for me, I'm the type of person when something gets like too much and, the first plant I kill, I'm like, that's it. I'm done. Goodbye. See ya. And then, and so it was very sporadic. Again, the inconsistency, this is so part of my nature. And so, it took not once, but twice now of this particular friend coming and being that mirror and showing me, calling it out. My husband being like, yeah, I don't know what the hell she's doing with these plants, basically. And then me being like, oh my gosh, like looking at myself like, wow, all he's asking, like all I can do, right? This resistance to just get like, I have the time. I do. I have the ability to wake up and water the plants, to check them every day, even though there's a lot, right? Like it's just an excuse. It's this resistance to doing it for whatever reason that was blocking me, kind of like just putting my head in the sand and not doing it. And then take this friend showing me and reflecting back to me something, seeing it through the lens of them, through my husband's like, and then it's like, you have this internal shift where, and I was talking to Keith about it, and he was like, yeah, I just don't think that you're on a good schedule because like some of them need watering. And I was like, no, it's not that at all. Honestly, the schedule is the least of my worries because like I'm not a consistent person. This is not, I was like, I wasn't thinking about the ripple effect of what it means to care about these plants. I didn't really give a shit in terms of the motivation of it. And then once I saw myself and I started to not judge myself, but I was like, oh, you're being kind of selfish. And you're not even thinking about the fact that you could be taking care of this one thing and have these beautiful, thriving plants in your beautiful bay window that you also manifested. And your husband comes home. It's like the thing of waking up in the morning and offering to make breakfast, right? It's this constant give and take of, he's not looking at the plants when he comes home from working his ass off and then coming home to work even more and to do the house shit, put the door up and do the things I need him to do around the house. And it's thinking about how does that experience shift when he comes home and there's not dying plants in the bay window or like plants that are like, help, I'm so dry. And how that shifts how he responds and interacts with me, and then how I open up. And it's this constant evolution, this cycle of learning that, like, of getting out of my own selfishness, out of my own little cozy comfort of bubble and doing something for my home that I very much realize that when I take care of my home, our life is peaceful. And I have the flexibility and the freedom to do that because of the way that we live. And I'm very lucky and I'm very blessed for that. And so it's like going back to the embodied gratitude as well. Am I living as an embodiment of gratitude for this life that we have by showing up for it and doing the tasks that I'm avoiding and that I'm being resistant to, and I'm letting it just fall on nobody's shoulders because who's going to do it? And those little shifts, and it cracked open something. And I can always tell when something makes me look at myself in an uncomfortable way about the way I've been acting. It always feels like an unlocking. Oh, ooh, that's uncomfortable. I don't like to see myself as anything but like, you're so great and blah, 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 right? Like, I mean, that's not true 100%, but it's when that uncomfortableness comes in and you're like, oh, I can do better. I can do better. And I don't need to explain myself to him. I don't need to say, oh, I forgot this. All I needed to say to him was like, I will do better. That's it. There's no fight. There's no back and forth. There's no, it's just, I'm going to do better. And it's so simple.
So when I think about your story of the plants in the house, I think about a couple of things. Your exterior replicates your interior, right? And so in situations with self-care, I think like this is a really beautiful example of self-care and partnership because if you just look at it, I'm sure there's some listeners, you can see that argument between husband and wife of like, you bought the fucking plants. You bought all of these. You're the one that's good at this, right? Instead of just how is this action reflecting inward on me? And it sounds like you really took the time to be present. And what's beautiful about that is just having your home and your space in an energetic place that feels good is self-care as well. And so I like that example of bringing that in and how one comment about the plants leads to a conversation about holistically the self-care of your family, your home,
Hmm.
all players involved, and how it also just allowed you to go introspective on that.
Totally. Yeah. And I am so far on the other end of the spectrum when it comes to and I keep bringing this up, but it's not, it's only because it's the only concept that comes to mind, but I am so opposite of people pleasing. I'm a Leo through and through. Like I don't have a problem with putting myself first. And so I think in relationship, it takes a lot of humbling and it takes a lot of awareness to realize that yes, I am deserving. And also I can be a queen, I can be a goddess, and I'm also not a literal queen who has servants. And my husband is not my servant and vice versa. And so I get to step outside of myself in that sense, be connected to something greater than myself, which is this relationship. And it's the peace that comes from evolving outside of your comfort zone and your norm. Like I can absolutely look at those moments where I can be self-indulgent and I don't have a problem with saying yes to myself and no to others. And it serves me really, really well in so many ways. And in so many ways, it's an opportunity for me to learn and to grow and to be better in partnership and to be more thoughtful. And I think that is part of the self-care too.
Hmm.
It's just getting out of your own, getting out of your own way and realizing, you can be worthy, you can be confident, you can be self-indulgent, but you can also be thoughtful and you can be considerate of the other people that do life with you. And that has such a return on the investment. It really does because it just changes everything. It's again back to more quotes, but we've said this one too. Ram Dass, you can do nothing for me but work on yourself, and I can do nothing for you but work on myself. And that is such a true testament in my life. And it is such a way that I do self-care.
Yeah. I had brought up the Peloton community earlier, but that the female instructors, specifically a handful that I really connected with the last couple of years, one of them always, Robin Arzona always says, self-care is not selfish. And she's a mom of two, and she's very transparent about the effort and work and community and what comes into play for her to be able to self-care. However, the consistency is just the self-care is not selfish. And they also, why I love that community is they do bring it full spectrum. It's like the mental, the physical, all of the things. And you said it differently, but same concept too. I think it is Hannah Corbin always says treat your body as if it was the person you loved most in this world. And so those are just some that kind of remind me. And I always think about what advice would you give to your best friend right now in this
Mhm.
self-care? What would you tell your best friend to do right now? And of course, you'd say, make the time, do the thing. And so just talking to myself really lovingly has been something that a lot of the instructors in the Peloton community have helped me continue to reinforce by how they show up. And obviously, I'm doing the work to show up, to be at the classes, to be in that community. But
Yeah.
those are some of the mantras that I think about when, the stickiness comes up around self-care and all of the different areas.
Strong
We're
inner
worthy of
dialogue.
that.
Yeah, yeah. We didn't say strong inner dialogue, but that's a big one for me too, is having that strong inner dialogue. I have it on my notes to write about this later, but because it plays such a huge role of being able to be your own advocate.
Yeah. All
And
right.
yeah, where do we want to leave on? I think this whole episode has been a self-love check-in.
Yeah, it feels like a real self-love check-in. And just with that, I think thanks for tuning in. And really, if we could leave you with anything today, it's just what is the next smallest step you could take to give yourself more self-care? And that can be 20 seconds of just breathing when you wake up in the morning. So we just love you and thank you for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in. If you resonate with today's conversation, connect with us on Instagram at Karmic Mirror Podcast and send us a message.
And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen. And if you're loving Karmic Mirror, we'd appreciate a glowing review or a share with someone who could benefit.
As we close, remember, life is not a one-size-fits-all approach. How are you honoring your unique path? Stay curious and always be kind to yourself. Until next time on Karmic Mirror.